Adapt or die. For European, UK business, it's a life or death situation. If you're going to compete with the productivity of your labor force, it's going to be difficult. You have to always be one step ahead.
Joining me today on All About Business is Livio Manzini. Livio is the chairman and CEO of Turkish manufacturing company Bell Holdings, which has been in his family for 3 generations. He's also president of the Italian Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Turkey.
At the end of the day, it's about productivity. In Europe, now, we seem to be wanting to work less for more. If you work 5 days a week, and another country, blue-collar workers work 6 days a week, that already is a 20% difference. So you're losing out on the economies of scale because you now have idle plants. I don't see any good coming from the tariffs. The benefits of globalization, it lifted billions of people out of poverty. Now you have new walls being erected everywhere, and protectionism hidden with the words fair trade.
And this global change is driven by US politics. So we've got to live in this world of fractured trade. What advice would you give to businesses?
Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests who have bootstrapped companies, masterminded investment models, or built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture.
Well, today on All About Business, I couldn't be more delighted than to welcome Livio Manzini, who's travelled all the way from Istanbul in Turkey to talk to us. Full disclosure here, Livio is my business partner in Turkey and has been for 15 years now. And I've invited him to come and talk to us on the podcast All About Business because every single meeting I've had with Livio over those 15 years, I've learnt something that I didn't expect or was interesting and I found helpful. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, and he's going to be sharing some new points that I don't even know about in this conversation now. Livio is the CEO and chairman of Bell Holdings, which is a manufacturing company based in Turkey, although he's of Italian heritage. He was born in Turkey, but is fluent in Italian and Turkish. And he's also the chairman...
Honorary chairman.
Honorary chairman of the Italian Chamber of Commerce in Istanbul and Turkey as well. So thank you so much for making the journey, Livio. Really warm welcome. I'm going to ask you a very self-serving question to begin with, because I happen to know, because you told me before, that your sort of early apprenticeship was served with a man called Philippe Desdaye, who's a sort of legend in the recruitment world, because Philippe he's French, and founded the company Echo in France, which later emerged with a company called Adia to become Adecco, which was ultimately the biggest recruitment company in the world. But your apprenticeship with Philippe was, I believe, here in the UK, as he was expanding Echo in the UK. And I'd like you to just tell me a little bit about what you did and what you learned.
Well, James, thank you very much for having me here today. I must say, it's a real pleasure and an honor to be in your podcast. Yes, the UK has figured prominently in my life at different stages of my life. I was a student here. Then later I worked for a British company as their country manager in Turkey. But Philippe Desdaye was my first employer after school, and he was really charismatic. I shouldn't say this, but I think he was very good at seeing the potential in people, because I was very young. And the UK operation was not doing very well. And there was even some question of whether it was going to continue or not.
This was the company Echo in the UK?
The company Echo in the UK. Yeah. It had 15 branches. And I was basically fresh out of school. And I said, no, I think the people here deserve to be given a second chance. And he made me general manager. Age, 24, 25. So I learned a lot from him.
So he put you in charge of those 15 officers, age 24, 25.
Exactly. And they saved the company, I think, but so I shouldn't...
So you saved the company. But what did you get from him in that process? You said you learned a lot from him. How does he operate?
Yes, I learned a lot from him. Well, he had two peculiarities. One, he was very cost-conscious, and he started with himself. So he hated costs.
Hated costs.
He hated costs.
I like that. Hating costs. I haven't heard that before.
In services, you really have to be very cost conscious. The margins we were making were clearly not very, very comfortable. And therefore, in his private life, he could be it was said that the company was his wife and his wife was his mistress. And so he was treating well his wife.
This is a continental thing. We don't have this sort of behavior in England.
Exactly. But this is what they said in the company. And so he was extremely cost conscious. When I started going for him to the US, it was always on companies at the time existed like People Express or on spare tickets that were sold at the last minute.
So not only did you not go business class.
No. You didn't even go economy class.
You didn't even go economy. You went sort of super cheap.
Super cheap, super cost conscious. Also the hotels we were staying in and so on.
I remember he made you share a room with him, didn't he?
Exactly.
So to save money.
We once went to New York and we had to share the room because they were very expensive. So this was one of his peculiarities. But the most important one, he was very charismatic. So people really loved to work for him. And he was very customer focused. And this is maybe the biggest lesson I took from him. I mean, he would not go to visit a branch, even if far-flung place of France. At the time, the company was mostly France, without going to a customer visit. And branch managers knew if Philippe Destusset was coming, they had to have a customer visit in the program. And there were these books. And when somebody was visiting, they would make notes of sort of things to do that were decided there. At the time, there was no internet, there was no mail. And so next time you came, you opened the book and you said, last time I was here, we talked about this. This happened in this custom. So what happened? And you would follow up.
Real follow-up on that.
You had really follow-up. So one was customer focus. Second, it was also follow-up. He was good at choosing his collaborators, his team. He had excellent people. And when he delegated, he basically delegated fully. I mean, at the time where communications, I came of age when the fax started being used. So you couldn't micromanage. I mean, I was in the UK, I was on my own. And I remember once I called him on a problem I had. And he said, it's your battle.
I know it sounds immodest in you saying, but I'm observing that. And you're an incredibly effective business leader who you spotted when you were in your early 20s. So, but you saw that in others as well that you worked with.
Yeah. The people I worked with, yeah. There was also a kind of joy of living in Adecco. People enjoyed themselves too.
Yeah, I think that's...
I mean, they sometimes made fun of the boss because he was stingy and so on. But
people make fun of the boss. I mean, for some reason or other. I'm absolutely certain. Yeah.
But they got that culture. So So
there's nothing wrong with being known for being stingy, is there? If you're trying to have a cost-controlling culture. So there's some valuable lessons there. So recently, Livio, we were looking at our business plans for the year ahead for Reed Turkey, which we run together and are partners in. And we were talking on a fairly dry subject of accounting. And suddenly, you shared with me a whole world of information I had no idea about, which I'm going to ask you about now, because I was sort of mesmerized by this. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And this is about the way our calendar works. I mean, I know you're biased because you're of Italian background, but in particular, why you think we should be using the original Roman calendar. Is that correct?
Yes. It's a bit facetious of me to say that we should move back to that. But
well, let's hear it. I mean, you might be making a very good
said
case.
That, it's actually pre-Roman, and it is a calendar or the cycle of 12 months in a year, which is closer to nature. And we as human beings or as living beings have been programmed, our metabolism has been programmed to work well in tune with the natural phases. As a matter of fact, The Economist, I think last week, advocated for the elimination of summertime, saying that it's it's ridiculous to continue.
I'm much more interested in your arguments, Livio, than The Economist.
Coming back to the calendar, it's actually pre-Roman, with basically the year starting with spring.
So the year begins in spring.
And life begins in spring.
When exactly in spring?
Well, 21st of March.
So you're saying that's the spring equinox. That's the beginning of the year in the ancient
Absolutely.
calendar.
Today in Iran, which is, together with the Vatican, the only two theocracies I know, the biggest festival or occurrence in the year are not the Islamic ones, but the 21st of March, Newruz, the start of spring. And it is the start of the official year in today's Iranian calendar. And the whole country closes down for close to a week.
So this predates Islam and Christianity.
Zoroastrianism, cult of fire and all that. And the Romans, of course, they started also with it, and they gave names to the months. And so it started with the Ides of March, so more or less, I guess. I don't know.
What are the Ides of March?
Probably around 21st of March as well. So that's when it started. And this is why today, a September, taking from the Latin sept, which means 7, should be the 7th month of the year and not the 9th. Month of the year. October, which is Octo 8, should be the 8th. November.
This must be particularly upsetting for you as an Italian.
Exactly.
All the numbers are like 2 out.
Exactly.
So how did that happen?
And it's not working because September is the 9th, October is the 10th.
Ridiculous, clearly, yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's quite funny why that happened, isn't it?
The Romans also messed it up a little bit.
They messed it up. The Romans
They messed it up. And then you have a Julius Caesar that comes along, and he decides that because he's God, whatever, he has a month all to himself. So he takes July.
Oh, so he's so important he gives the month his own name.
Yeah, so Julius, July, is the month of Julius Caesar, and it has 31 days. Then along comes Augustus, and he says, who am I?
He's another important emperor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he takes August to himself.
Yeah. And he can't have fewer days.
He cannot have fewer days.
So he's got 31 as well.
So he goes, where does he steal the day from? From the last month of the year, which is February.
One. Oh, I didn't know.
He steals it from February. This is why February is a bit of a, bizarre month with less days than everybody else.
So Augustus stole a day from February.
Well, yes, and then he had to.
I bet you didn't know that.
He had to reschedule everything else.
So he rescheduled it. Yeah. So then February ended up short.
And the
numbers are all out.
And it was the last month of the year. And it is in tune with nature. I mean, if you say that life restarts every year in spring, which it does, and our metabolism and everything else, I think also for business, it works better than the Gregorian calendar. On top of it, obviously...
So just explain the Gregorian calendar.
Well, this is where we start on 1st of January.
What we have now.
And then, of course, the Russians have got something a bit different because... The first Christian calendar moved to January and all that. Yeah. And then Pope Gregorius, he also brought it back he made some calculations and he changed the day. So the Orthodox and the Catholics have got different calendars.
There were riots in England when the Pope did that
really?
Because people thought they'd lost 10 days of their life. Which was, it really kicked off in London. I remember studying that. So that's what happened. So there's a lot going on with these dates. So what are the implications for business?
Well, the implication of business, I mean, right now, we have at the end of year for companies that close down their accounts at the end of December, which, by the way, December, DHE 10 is the 10th. Should be the 10th month. Right. We have Christmas, which is a big holiday. Then New Year, which is also, time festive. And we have to close the year. We have to make up our budgets. So it's quite stressful. If Christmas remained in December, but New Year was either the end of February or the end of March, I think for business it would probably work better. Yeah. Certainly for
it could be
CEOs. For CEOs, it would certainly work.
The spring
better.
equinox would be your preference.
My preference, yes.
I think we might struggle to persuade people to do that, but I would agree that's got a lot of appeal.
The interesting
it's a nice time of year for a holiday as well.
Exactly. Interestingly, in some countries, the government's fiscal year is in March.
Yeah, it is here. Well, it starts. The tax year starts beginning of April. So your business, does your accounting year end in December or another
Yes,
time?
It does.
So ours used to, and then we switched it to end in June, which I find quite helpful because you don't have the stress of the sort of Christmas.
Absolutely. No, you're quite right.
Activities.
Plus, you divided the year not in 12 months, but in 52 weeks, which is also brilliant.
So just to explain to listeners, in our business, we have 13 4-week periods.
Exactly.
Which we introduced, a long time ago now, 2008. Which was a bit of an adjustment from 12 months. But people like it because they get paid 13 times.
Oh, okay.
And I like it because you get 13 goes at sort of making sales. And
then you can compare one period with another.
Yeah, and the periods are the same length and so comparable rather than a 31-day month versus a 28-day month. And that's actually the lunar cycle. So it's more in tune with nature as well.
Excellent.
So that's what I like about it. It has a sort of rhythm with the lunar cycle. What do you think about the clocks going backwards and forwards then, given this? Because that's an added piece of confusion that's been thrown in by administrators.
You mean summertime?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think summertime is, maybe at the time there was a reason. There is absolutely no good reason for, the specialists say that it's not good for your health either.
Well, because we all get jet lag or something, is that?
Well, I don't know.
Well, in the spring, I find like this time of year, early summer. I wake up really early in the morning because it's daylight, I suppose. And I like to get up early when it's like that. But I don't feel like that in December, which is now in my mind as the 10th month of the year. So I'm really going to be confused. so this is interesting because I think, life works to certain rhythms, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So trying to get your
our
business
metabolism,
established in a way.
Our energy level. I mean, it changes with age as well, but it does also change with nature. And the idea is to get the most to work in a company, to have the company work at its best. And the company is made up of people. Machines are important, but people are, as you know, always more important.
It's probably something that not many managers and business leaders give that much thought to, but it's well worth thinking about. You're based in Turkey. Your business is based in Turkey. Could you just tell me a little bit about it, Bell Holdings?
Okay, well, Bell Holding is turning 85 this year. So clearly I am, let's say, third generation. It was originally set up making soap. So we didn't steal the name Bell from anybody. It was a soap, and interestingly enough, the brand belonged to Unilever, at the time Lever Brothers. Port Sunlight was their main soap manufacturing place. It was the 1940s. International trade has totally collapsed. And Turkey basically was not even producing soap. So a group of European permanent residents at the time, Constantinople. No, sorry, it was already Istanbul maybe. Decided to make soap. So they opened a small soap factory. And then if you fast forward to today, Bell Holding is just a holding. And the companies that are fully controlled are all involved in making packaging material for fast-moving consumer goods, plus some activities in services, such as Reed Turkey. But the bulk is making consumer goods packaging in both aluminum and plastic for pharmaceuticals, personal care, home care, food. Those are the main
So what
areas.
sort of products specifically might you be packaging?
We make the packaging. We don't fill them.
You don't
The
fill
customer fills them. Companies, I mean, multinationals such as Unilever.
So Unilever is still a big client.
Unilever is still one of our main customers, yes.
Yeah.
We would make, for instance, aerosol cans in aluminum for them. Then for pharmaceutical companies, we make tubes for creams, ointments. We would make bottles for ketchup, mayonnaise, or shampoo. And
So all these things we sort of just pick up and use and probably take for granted.
Absolutely,
You're producing. And you do that for export, principally
you cannot
in Turkey.
export everything, but we do export. And obviously our customers in Turkey, they in turn, once they have filled the bottle or the tube, they do export the finished product.
Right. So a lot of these products, cans, bottles, end up in other countries.
Exactly. Turkey is a very good manufacturing hub, let's say, for these multinationals, some of whom, by the way, are now Turkish multinationals because over time, countries such as Turkey have developed their own champions who have grown internationally.
I mean, Turkey, as you said, is a very important hub for manufacturing now and seems to have won a lot of business from Europe and elsewhere. What is it about Turkey that makes it so good for this type of work?
After the collapse, let's say, of the Soviet Union, the first countries where manufacturing investment went were the Eastern European countries, places like Poland, Hungary, and so on. Like in North America, the Americans developed this, what is being called a co-prosperity sphere with Mexico, Canada, and the US. In Europe, we pulled in the let's say, Soviet colonies. Turkey was on the fringes and then started becoming more important. What is in particular now that we want to say, just to use a term that is being used, decouple from China, from the Far East. If you look at it closely, there aren't so many other alternatives for the EU than Turkey. I mean, Turkey is a big landmass, so there is space to build greenfield sites. The infrastructure is excellent. Communications, I mean, Turkish Airlines is the airline in the world with the most international connections, it's number one. Telecommunications, roads, shipping, you have harbors, you have top-class harbors, you have top-class banking system, you have people, educated, good universities. Big population. And they are hard workers. I mean, basically, at the end of the day, what makes a difference when I say is people. The Turkish worker is productive. Yes, obviously, the cost of labor is still lower than in the EU, but productivity is not just a question of money.
No.
It's a question of flexibility, of attitude to work. And in Turkey, all these are positives. I mean, we have factories outside of Turkey as well, and we see the difference.
So that positions Turkey pretty well. How big's the population of Turkey?
Population of Turkey is 85 million.
Right.
It grew very fast. It's now like the rest of the world. Demographics are now. So it's not yet an aging country. It's just about there. It's starting to approach the threshold.
So it might become more like Europe.
It will eventually, yeah. But it still has a catching up to do because per capita income is still lower than the EU average. And the Turks are really interested in doing this catching up. They want to get there.
Isn't Turkey in the customs union? Is that correct?
Exactly. One of the big advantages, I failed to mention it, is that it has a customs union with the EU. And now it has also...
Which, interestingly, we do not have in the
Exactly.
UK, which is quite telling.
But for the UK, the relationship with Turkey is so important that the next day from Brexit, the UK signed a trade deal with Turkey. It was the first trade agreement they signed, and it was less than 24 hours after having left the EU.
And I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that tells
and now
you,
they're negotiating an even deeper, let's say, trade relation between the UK and Turkey.
Trade is very much on the global agenda, isn't it, with tariffs being increased and the potential for a trade war escalating. I mean, where do you think we're headed with all this? I mean, as someone who's been sort of
obviously,
all your career.
I view it with alarm, but also a lot of sadness, because after, let's say, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the failure of ideology-managed economies, let's say, there was a period, and they even said, it's the end of history, where everybody was in tune. And the benefits of globalization, the benefits of managing economies rationally, and everybody was in agreement with that. And it lifted billions of people out of poverty.
So that's your perspective from Turkey. You could see that happening.
Yeah, you could see that happening. Yeah,
because I suppose in America, or in parts of the UK, they saw certain cities and neighbourhoods in decline.
Well, there are always winners and losers.
Yeah, that seems to be
and
the case.
The politicians, I think, are at fault of not addressing. There are going to be losers, and you have to address that fact. You cannot just ignore it.
Sort of deindustrialization in Europe and that sort of
exactly. So, but it did the world a lot of good, and the average American got much richer. The average European got also richer, but not that much. But then at some point this stopped, and now you have new walls being erected everywhere. Some of them, in my view, mental. And it is sad because it's going to be, again, opportunities lost. Protectionism, hidden with the words fair trade, has never actually created... some people will win, clearly. But on aggregate, I don't see that.
Well, the history of protectionism, I'm not an expert, you might be able to help me, but is that people have always decided they don't want to do it anymore at some point because it hasn't worked, I think, or it hasn't given them the upside perhaps they were hoping for.
Well, you see, we have this experience. I mean, if I look at it from the point of view of bell holding, okay?
Yeah.
So our main company in 1980 was the company making aluminum tubes and aerosol cans. Turkey was extremely protectionist. It was a closed society. Producer were king. We could sell what we were producing at any price. People had no choice. You wanted an aluminum tube or an aerosol, you had to come to us.
No one else was producing. So you
had
the market yourself.
You had the market to yourself. And then overnight, the then Prime Minister eliminated custom barriers.
So you went from high tariffs to no tariffs.
It wasn't just a question of tariffs. You needed import permits to import anything. It was a fairly complex kind of thing. To tell you, and it went on for much longer, the importation of alcohol was not forbidden, but it was the monopoly of the state. And the state didn't use that monopoly. So no alcohol was imported. But officially it wasn't forbidden, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and we had to adapt or die. And this is our motto. The motto of our company has always been adapt or die.
That's your motto.
We had, I don't know how many people we had at the time. And now we have 1/3 and we're making 3 times as much. It's more or less that kind of ratio. Because you become inefficient. When you are cosseted and protected and so on, you have no incentive to become better, you see. And this is why competition is so good. This is why, capitalism and liberal economics are based on this. But there are losers. There are always going to be losers. And tomorrow, this could be us. Politicians have to address that.
Not many politicians seem to be making the case for this, which is interesting. Seems to have gone out of fashion, or everyone's decided it wasn't the right thing. But we might look back on the last 25 years and think that was a sort of golden era.
Being a liberal today in the US, I think, is an insult.
I don't think it is here, but there is a Liberal Party, which doesn't get a lot of votes.
No, I'm not talking in terms of
no, I know what you mean.
Party,
it's become sort of a label that I find disparaging. So flipping it from the Turkish experience, why do you think the US or Europe has not competed successfully in manufacturing? Why is it that we... because this is where manufacturing started.
Yes, it's still continuing,
Yeah, but it doesn't seem to
not
continue.
in the UK that much, but Germany and Italy are still big manufacturing countries, and manufacturing is still an important part of their economy. And now Spain as well, and then, as I told you, Poland and Hungary have taken over. But at the end of the day, it's really about, first of all, clearly innovation, and secondly, about productivity. I'll give you a very simple example. If you work 5 days a week, and another country, the blue-collar workers work 6 days a week, like in Turkey, okay? So that already is a 20% difference, okay?
Oh, you didn't say that earlier. So the Turkish worker works 6 days a week?
6 days a week, yeah, 48 hours.
48 hours.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. The difference between 5 and 6 days is not just a question of labor work time. Your capital invested in the machinery is also working only 5 and not 6 days.
Yeah.
So the price at which you have to sell the goods that come out, you're losing out on the economies of scale because you also now have idle plant. And in a world where everybody's working 5 days a week and all the plants are closed for 2 days, that wouldn't be so dramatic. But it's not the case. And it's not just a question of how much you pay the workers. I haven't done the maths, but I think in Europe, you could pay people more, but get them to work more. Now, we seem to be wanting to work less for more. Clearly, life-work balance is important. But at the end of the day, when you are in production processes, which are continuous, you need to keep plant and machinery working all the time.
So there's a debate, or in the UK, some people are arguing for a 4-day working week. Do you have that in Turkey? Are people advocating that?
No.
You're looking a bit incredulous. And I think the people who are making that argument don't expect to get 80% of the pay. They expect to get the full pay for the 4 days. And the idea is you do 10 hours a day for 4 days instead of 8 hours a day for 5. What would you take on that?
It really depends what kind of business you're in. But for manufacturing, that doesn't work.
Are your manufacturing plants open 24/7?
Yes, absolutely.
So you're running all the time?
Yeah. And
so you
shift
just have
work
to
is
schedule
difficult.
people so they're always somewhere.
Shift work, you do 3 times 8. Shift work is difficult. I mean, we talked about being in tune with nature.
Yes.
Clearly, working at night is not natural. And therefore, people who work at night do get more. It's all fair. But you need to keep the plants working.
I hadn't thought of that. If you have 10-hour working days, you can't get 3 in a 24-hour.
Exactly. It's very difficult.
That goes with what you were saying right at the beginning, that 8 hours work.
You have to build a 4th shift or a 5th shift. It becomes very
And people don't
very
get enough
difficult.
hours.
Yeah.
I suppose that's being sort of driven by people who work in service type.
Well, exactly. As I'm saying, it depends the type of business that you're in.
Well, the message I'm receiving from you is that we're in a very competitive world. And if not everyone's working at the same pace and on the same timetable, don't be upset if you get out-competed.
Well, I mean, the Chinese have got 2 advantages. They work very hard. Right now, by the way, their monthly salary has gone up.
Chinese.
The Chinese, they're not working for a pittance.
So they're quite well paid now.
Well, quite well. They're much better paid than at time. I mean, I think it's coming close to Turkey, Bulgaria, or Romania, whatever kind of salary. But they work the hours. And they're very productive. They work very hard. And they have a scale. Yes. So they have these economies of scale, which are very difficult to match because they're producing for an economy of 1.3 billion people.
What do you think will happen then with these tariffs on Chinese goods?
No, the tariffs I respect everybody's opinion. I don't see any good coming from the tariffs. And it is actually surprising because the economy of the US was really at the end of the Biden era in great shape, and it was top dog in the world. When you look at the per capita income between the US and the EU, like 20 years ago, it was fairly close, and then it diverged, and the US is now much richer. So criticizing the EU seems very strange.
But it is on paper, isn't it? But is that money evenly spread? You know, the per capita income, or has it all gone to people like Jeff Bezos, who's sort of worth a fortune?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I don't know. I mean, clearly inequalities are much higher in the US than they would be in some EU countries, clearly.
And this now global sort of change is driven by US politics, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah,
because the president seems to be doing absolutely what he said he'd do when he sought election. He is giving his voters what they asked for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's not much the rest of us. So we've got to live in this world of sort of fractured trade. What advice would you give to businesses?
I mean, the businesses in the EU, let's say, or UK, or even the American ones, you have to always be one step ahead. And that is R&D, innovation, so investing in higher education, research, automation. I mean, one way to reshore some jobs is to make them highly automated. We ourselves are very much involved in trying to improve our productivity with digitalizing our production lines. And after that, trying to automate them. But for European, UK business, it's a life or death situation. I mean, you need to stay one step ahead. In a sense,
that extreme. Why do you say that? Life or death situation, that's a strong
Well, because
statement.
If you're going to compete with the productivity of your labor force, it's going to be difficult because you're not going to go back to a 6-day week. So you need to do more with less. And this is automation. Highly automated factories, bringing in robots. A lot has been done. A lot more can be done. And I think the public authorities, the governments, have to pay for part of this transition, let's say. What is, in a sense, also worrying is that the Chinese are doing a lot of that. So against the other emerging markets like Brazil, South Africa, India, whatever, we can still stay one step ahead. With China, it's more difficult.
So this might be a trade war that China wins.
Ooh, not up to me to speculate. Not up to me to speculate. I tend to believe that trade wars have only losers.
Yeah, they're only losers. Yeah,
there are only losers. At least this is what I think.
I can see why you would say that. Let's talk for a little bit about sort of business through the generations. You said your company's 85 this year. Our company is 65 this year. So you've got 20 years on us. Livio, congratulations to you. So you're third generation. What does it take for a business to transition and grow and be, super relevant like yours through 3 generations? And what are your thoughts for the future?
It's adaptability, being agile, adaptive, and open to new ideas. In our case, we moved from making soap to then making packaging. Then we were in a protected environment. The prime minister at the time, in 1980, he opened up the country all of a sudden. And in our company at the time, it was headed by my father. They didn't sort of whine or cry or whatever. They said, okay, guys, let's get down to work. We have to remain relevant. So we have to adapt. We have to be agile.
What did they do at that time?
Invest in more, in better plant and machinery.
So they put more money into the business.
Exactly, because it was, at the end of the day, when you are in a protected environment, why invest in new machinery?
You can run your old ones for as long as possible.
Yeah, until they die. Then you benchmark. That's the other thing. You have to be extremely fair with yourself and call a spade a spade. You have to know where you are. You have to benchmark yourself with your competitors and see the distance. And the distance can be a matter of despair or can be a challenge. Okay, this is our target.
But you're saying you were behind the competitors when you started doing that.
International competitors, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was quite hard at the time, I suppose.
But they did it. And then when I came
just a question, how did you do that benchmarking exercise? Do you get consultants to do it or your own people?
Yes, you got
some outside help.
Consultants, international
and that's what you asked
consultants.
for, a benchmarking exercise.
Yeah. you can also, we joined international associations of companies doing the same job, and we do have benchmarks internally.
But you suddenly became quite outward looking. You really
Exactly.
embraced the change rather than complain about it.
You embrace the change. Yeah. But in order to do that, you also need, and that's also where, maybe a bit like this to say, we had in the company people that were, you cannot impose that. You can preach by example, but they have to have an open mind. Because you will hear like, oh yeah, this worked elsewhere, but this is Turkey. Or we've been doing it quite successfully like this for many years, why change? In our case, it wasn't like that. First of all, maybe because they thought, okay, we can be hammered here. So that worked quite well. And when I came along, I came with a different set of experience. So this I would also recommend. It worked for me. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody. But I had 10 years work experience, with Philippe Destosé, and then I joined Glaxo with Glaxo and so on. So I was bringing my own credibility in a sense. And again, when I brought new ideas, at a time when Turkey was continuing to open itself up to the world, within the company, it was seen as an opportunity, not as a risk. So that was quite good. And I must say, at the time, in most of these countries, which ended up to open up more or less in the 90s, it was fairly easy to start something and be successful because you just needed to look what had been successful in the US, what had been successful in Europe. And it was a globalizing world. So I thought, chances are it's going to work here. This is how I brought temporary staff and so on, which didn't exist. I also introduced guarding services, uniform didn't exist. So these things worked. Clearly, I may have missed some opportunities. Some of the biggest successes have been in mobile telephony. I erroneously assumed that the big winners in mobile telephony would be the legacy carriers, but it didn't work out that way.
You could have set your own one up. We all have regrets like that.
Maybe.
What do you think
not.
about now, though? What would you see as? Do you still look for opportunities from the US or Europe now? And what would you be looking
we still do, but it's harder now because everything moves so fast. Technology, communications, and there are startups everywhere. Turkey also has its own startup base.
Yeah, information's much more available now.
Much more
available. You can
available.
see what people are doing.
So you need, in a sense, instead of bringing something in, we are now at an age where you need to have your own idea. You need to spot an opportunity. You need to invent something yourself. It can be a service. It doesn't have to be.
So how would you be looking to reinvent Bell in this?
Well,
to head to 100.
spotting
have you got anything in mind, though?
One thing that I learned from some of our customers is that there are still what is called white areas in the world and also in packaging. So there are some countries which are big countries population-wise, but have not yet, let's say, are just potential. Africa is considered, one of them, of those areas. And therefore, there could be opportunities.
But would you go and establish there potentially? So you should open a factory.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have factories in Africa now?
No. We're present in Bulgaria and in Italy with a factory.
So you could go and expand.
Exactly. Ethiopia, say, is a huge country, 100 million people.
It is.
And very little manufacturing base. And those people also need the same shampoos or deodorants.
Yeah, they certainly do. And it's a very interesting country. I've been fortunate enough to visit it.
Good.
Yeah,
okay.
I can recommend you go and have a look. So what about the sort of movement from one generation to the next? What are your thoughts on that? Are you going to continue as a family business?
Well, exactly. I always consider that I took it in trust for the next generation when I took over from my father. And so, yes, I want to give a chance to my children. And my eldest son is working in one of our.
So he's interested in.
So he's interested.
He's your sort of a likely successor.
We have 3 children, so but I want to give them a chance to take over if they want to. But it cannot be forced. My father never forced me to come back. No. It was my decision.
What did he do to lure you back?
Well,
because it's not a given.
No,
I
came back.
Next generation
I came back as I was recruited by Glaxo Pharmaceuticals to be general manager in Turkey. Obviously, I was looking for a way back. My father helped with the introduction. But then I came to Turkey as general manager of Glaxo, and I had the possibility to have an international career in Glaxo. So after Turkey, go somewhere else. And at some point, I decided, with, of course, the approval of my wife, to make the jump and quit an international career for joining the family firm. I have no regrets.
No regrets. That was going to be my next question.
No regrets.
So that was a good decision. So what
Glaxo was a fantastic company.
Sure, it is a fantastic. So you made that decision. Why are you so comfortable with it? Why do you have no regrets? Why do you think it was a good decision? What is it about running your own business that you particularly like?
Well, I have always been an entrepreneur at heart. So I always wanted to build companies, basically.
Yeah.
You have it I have it in my blood. I think I'm called a serial entrepreneur. And obviously, the family company was the right place where to do that. I mean, when I joined the family firm...
You couldn't have done that at Glaxo, per se.
No.
You'd have to convince a lot of people to start something new there.
Exactly. When I joined the family firm, I initially spent very little time looking at what was happening already. I did my own things, and most of them worked.
Most of them, you're ahead of me then. so I think one of the things that my father said to me, you've reminded me of it, is that a business is a vehicle, and you think of it as a vehicle. You can take it in any number of directions. You don't have to keep doing what we're doing now. No. And you've illustrated that, saying you started out in the soap business, and now you're doing all sorts of different things.
Exactly.
And you've built a successful business by starting and trying new things and looking for what the market wants, I guess.
As they say very often, no enterprise is built on dreams, and none without. You have to, of course, have a vision. You also have to have
I haven't heard that
your
saying
feet
before.
on the
So
on
no
the
enterprise
ground.
is built on dreams, but none without.
Exactly. You hadn't heard that?
No.
I didn't invent it. So
No, I like it. So let's explore that a bit. So what does that mean to you?
Well, it means to me, you see, sometimes I have young people, let's say, that come for advice, and some, look at my past and say, yeah, I would like to be my own boss. I would like to have my own company and build my own company. And I tell them, okay, do you have a dream? Having your own company is the result of the dream. You don't start by building a company and then deciding what to do. You need to have something in your mind. You need to have spotted something that you're going to make a different hamburger, or because you see that the current ones are not good enough. I'm just,
picking that as an example.
Just picking that as an example.
So something you care about. Or...
Something you care about. And you see an opportunity and you say, I'm not satisfied. I think I can do better. And then you start selling this idea to friends and family. And it's like you get in love with your idea. And building the company is the next step, maybe in your garage or whatever. But you have to start with the idea, with the dream, and very often money is not involved. I mean, you don't set it up because you want to become rich. If you're successful, then you make money, and making money becomes the measure of the success. But you don't set up to become rich. You set up to make a better hamburger.
Yeah.
You set up to make a better sock or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's really important advice to all would-be entrepreneurs. Because, solving problems is what it's
exactly
often about. Is there anything, you said you're a born entrepreneur. Is there any advice you'd give to people who share that feeling, who want to get started? You've said you have a dream, but what are the practicalities?
Well, the practicalities is unfortunately, the rest is pain. It's a lot of pain. Pain,
so
yes.
be prepared for some pain. Well, what
be prepared for some, which means...
What pain are you talking about here,
Well,
Livio?
it's 24/7. When you get on an idea, forget about sitting in your office and directing other people. You have to be on the front line, day in, day out. That has not changed. So that's the first thing. And the second is that unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work. So you have to give yourself a stop loss.
So you have to, that's hard to do, isn't it?
That's very hard to do.
Kill an idea that you've put so much
but
passion
you have
and energy
to
into.
be objective enough with yourself to see whether it's not working out. Maybe it was too early.
Do you get
Market
someone
was
else to
not
help
ready.
you with that, or is it just that
Yes, it would be good to have somebody help you with that. Having a virtual board. And there are associations that do that.
or something?
Yeah, mentor. There are associations that do that too.
Yeah, because otherwise, you can keep going doing the same thing for far too long. And
Yeah.
You run services. I mean, I'd like to explore this as we come to a close, but you run service businesses and manufacturing businesses. What have you learned from the sort of overlay? Because often people are in one or the other, but you're pretty unique in doing both.
Yes, but I don't know how unique it
other?
is, but in my case, I see a lot of overlaps, and that's strange to say. First of all, let me clarify something. We are in manufacturing, but we make to order. So all our customers are asking tailor jobs from us. We don't produce for stock, put it in shops and wait for people to come and buy. It's orders because it's intermediary goods. So say Unilever needs aerosol cans, they place an order, we make it the shape they want, we make it with the print they want, etc. And it cannot be sold to somebody else. I'm saying this because in both cases, the service part of the offering is perhaps in some cases even more important than the quality, because you need to be attentive to the needs of your customer. Every customer is different. Every customer has different requirements, different needs, and a different culture, a different approach. It requires a different level of attention or detail, like in services. And this is what makes you or us successful. We're pretty proud that we have developed long-standing relationships with our customer that go back to, well, in the case of Unilever, 8 years, but with others, pretty long time. Not because they didn't have an alternative, but because if you are giving them what they want in terms of quality, but also service, and you live the journey with them, they don't necessarily need to go and look for something else. And that's happened. I mean, we've lost customers and we're gaining new ones. Very often we gain new ones because they're not happy, not with the quality, but sometimes with the service that they're getting from competitors. So the service element becomes so important that service companies, manufacturing have got in that.
So I see in a way you've
an overlap there.
Brought sort of a lot of service expertise to manufacturing. Have you also brought manufacturing expertise into services?
I try.
I try. I associate really slick manufacturing with great automation and efficiency, just-in-time inventory, lack of waste. You try.
Yes, I try.
Is it more difficult to do that in services?
It's more difficult to get service productivity up than machine productivity.
That's interesting. It's also difficult to get consistency, isn't it? Because of, I suppose because of the involvement of people.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you can produce a widget over and over and it comes out pretty much the same. But the service delivery, I mean, I suppose McDonald's is an exemplar of sort of producing something consistently all around the world. And you know what you're going to get when you walk in. But there are many examples of that.
Absolutely. And they are very careful about that.
Yeah. Just to wrap up, I mean, obviously climate change is a huge concern for people around the world. You're in manufacturing. There's a lot of policy around net zero that seems to be coming up against pushback because people say that it's increasing energy costs and it's making it impossible for companies to produce things in a price competitive way. Where do you think we're going with this and what do you think should happen next?
It's both a good question and I don't necessarily have an answer. I think climate change and global warming is the biggest threat that we are facing. And we are, I think, past the level. We can keep global temperatures below this famous 1.5 degree. We have to look at ways to minimize the impact instead of preventing it, to adapting. And therefore, we are in uncharted territory. And US administration is going in a totally opposite direction, not caring too much about it. So it's not going to make it any simpler. The planet will survive. Planet will change, but it will survive. What we're talking is about the survival of life, of human beings. And some parts of the planet will become inhospitable. And so there are going to be massive movements of populations probably. And then we're talking, of course, about the animal species in the seas and so on, who are also threatened. We now see tropical fish in the Mediterranean, and they seem much more aggressive, and they kill off the local ones. As I say, the planet will survive. Yeah. How are we going to live on this planet that it is what we're talking about? We are also more and more people. The standard of living of people have increased, so the consumption of consumer products, packaged goods, has increased. So we produce more and more trash or post-consuming. And therefore, we also need to address that problem. We are running out of space for landfill, so we have to go past landfill, and we shouldn't be throwing it in nature or in the seas. Even though, according to me, deep sea fishing does much more harm to the ocean population, fish population in the ocean than plastics. But it has to be addressed. We're trying to do our own little bit. We are starting a recycling business for plastic packaging. But governments have to be more involved. I mean, it's a question of fiscal policy. And it has to be...
When you say fiscal policy, what do you think they should do?
Well, I mean, if you want people to use more recycled plastic material, you have to make the virgin plastic material more expensive. People react to that kind of stimulus. If you say you have to use 30% in your packaging, that is an empty threat. But if you have to pay more when you buy plastic, you have a tax on plastic, virgin plastic, then you make recycled plastic more
Has anyone
attractive.
done that? Has anyone introduced that?
Yeah, apparently they should, but you cannot introduce it just in the UK. Then you make the UK
that's what I was wondering.
uncompetitive.
Exactly, that's the concern.
Has to be coordinated.
But that hasn't happened.
No, that is not really happening.
So this question of coordination has come up more than once.
Yeah, you cannot rely on the consumer. I mean, the consumer will not pay necessarily more. I mean, some will, but it will not be a mass movement.
But then I suppose governments are reluctant to make things more expensive for people when they're already struggling with the cost of living crisis. So we're caught in this.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
So maybe it's innovation we need to rely on here.
Yes, there are there is a lot of research.
If everything became biodegradable.
Yeah. Enzymes. There is a lot of research in that. Absolutely likely that
you see a future in which we might have totally biodegradable packaging.
Totally biodegradable, or enzymes and other, let's say, processes to degrade the plastic, even if it wasn't biodegradable initially. Yeah. There is a lot of research in that
because
space.
I mean, there's a lot of garbage around, and it would be good if it was recycled.
And loading it into a ship and sending it to the other end of the world is not a solution.
No, they have rubbish dumped somewhere else. That's what happens a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So offshoring of carbon and rubbish is not a solution.
Not.
Okay, Livio. Well, thank you very much for coming to talk to me from Istanbul. I think we've covered a lot of ground there. I found it fascinating. I'm going to go back to a Roman calendar by myself and see
Let's do it together.
Let's do it together. I think business should take the lead. I think it makes a lot of sense. But I think trying to work in harmony with nature and the natural world makes complete sense to me in terms of people's well-being and energy, and that of our organizations as well. Now I'm going to ask you, I ask you at the end, 2 questions I ask everybody.
Okay.
And the first question is there's a clue on the wall here. What is it that gets you up on a Monday morning, Livio?
Well, today is a Monday. So this morning it was your podcast, basically. Looking forward to your podcast.
So
that certainly
that got you
made sure I was awake before 7 this morning.
Good.
But apart from that, I'm always connected. So I never really switch off. So the weekend is when I start having, sometimes weird ideas, but ideas and so on. And so I look forward to Monday because that's the moment when I can get my collaborators around me and bounce it off the wall.
See what they think about your weekend's ideas.
Exactly. What can we do with this?
Yeah.
So I look forward to Mondays. Yes. I do love Mondays.
Oh, I'm pleased to hear that. And I like the idea of weekends being a sort of time for gestation of ideas. And then my last question, which is in the Italian version of my interview book, Why You, which is behind you there, Livio, as well as the English one, is one of the fateful 15 interview questions. It's, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
In my case, it's fairly obvious, let's say, because I've told everybody that I want to retire from day-to-day operations when I turn 70, and I'm 64. So, the company will have turned 90 by then. So really my challenge is succeeding in the succession planning and then being more of a mentor. And, I may have some personal projects. So
you wouldn't be chairman?
I could be non-executive chairman.
Right. But you want to step back at 70.
Yes, exactly.
I wish you total success with that, Livio. Thanks very much.
But not to stay home and watch TV. So
I suspect you won't be doing that. That's good to hear. Okay. Thanks, Livio. That was really interesting.
Thank you, James. So did you learn something?
Yeah, I did. Adapt or die. I like that. Well, thanks again for coming in. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you, James. Much appreciated.